Dark and Darker is a PvPvE dungeon crawler extraction game where your goal is to enter the dungeon and get out with as much loot as possible. You get to keep your loot by exiting the dungeon alive and before time runs out. Before you enter the dungeon, you must choose a class to play as. These include Fighter, Barb, Rogue, Cleric, Wizard, Warlock, Bard, Druid, Sorcerer, and Ranger. Easiest classes to play for new players are Fighter, Barb, Cleric, and Warlock. With your class chosen, you must now choose the map to play on. There are 3 maps: Goblin Caves, Ice Caves, and Ruins. The Ice Caves and Ruins have normal blue exits and red exits that take you to further levels with better loot and harder enemies. Goblin Caves only have 1 level and only blue exits that return you directly to the lobby. Goblin Caves also has the easiest enemies and is recommended for learning the game. Each piece of loot you equip adds to your total gear score. Higher gear quality equals higher gear score. However, if you die, the loot is lost. If you want to play with no risk as you learn, you can play the game in the 0 to 24 gear score lobby, where all your gear is supplied by the Squire Merchant each round, so you don't have to risk gear acquired from previous raid. The gear score increases in several brackets all the way up to highroller, which is above 124 gear score and is considered the ranked mode with even better gear and harder enemies. Now that you've chosen gear and lobby, it's time to enter the dungeon and fight off the mobs as you loot. There are many guides that exist to learn each attack animation from all enemies, but all you need is basic knowledge to deal with them all. When you enter a mob's attack range, it will trigger an attack animation. Use this to your advantage by walking directly into a mob and immediately walking away. You should never walk away by holding the S key. This slows you down. Instead, turn to the side and use either A or D. This will trigger an attack, but you will be out of range. You can either attack the mob during his recovery phase, stay back and learn the attack pattern, or simply use the time the mob is attacking to run away. These steps apply to all mobs. Assume that there is always a way to avoid damage by dodging, blocking, or parrying. There are also many places in the game where you can stand on an object or ledge and cheese the enemies by hitting them when they cannot hit you. Keep in mind there are bosses marked by these doors with runes on them, unless you're in Infernos where all the doors look like this. These bosses drop rare loot and are much harder to kill. There are also several sub-bosses throughout all the maps that function in a similar way, but to a lesser degree. In High Roller, all mobs are upgraded to either Nightmare or Elite modes, where they do more damage, have higher movement speed, and the Nightmare variants have an added effect or additional attacks in their moveset. There is a small chance of elite enemies spawning in normal lobbies. You can tell by their color. Red are elite and black are nightmare. Ensure to be able to easily fight the normal version of these enemies before playing in higher gear score lobbies. When dealing with a pack of mobs, you can do what is called dragging. After a left click and the attack animation comes out, you can alter the course of the weapon by dragging the cursor through all the enemies, hitting them all at once. This works on players too if you're fighting multiple at a time. One of the best ways to escape bad situations from mobs or enemy players is by standing in a doorway and closing it behind you. You can also use doors to drag a group of enemies out of your way if you do not want to fight them. This is particularly good with Wizard, Rogue, and Warlock, since they have ways to easily escape mobs and get back to the door to close it. While delving through the dungeons, you might encounter other players. Just like many other games, PvP is mostly about proper spacing, movement, and game knowledge. To start, spacing is very self-explanatory. Just like spacing a mob while clearing through the dungeons, the same spacing rules apply. You should try to hit the enemy player without being hit. This often results in the game known as footsies, with each player trying to catch the other player in a swinging animation to create an opportunity for free damage. Good movement makes a player's spacing much better. Don't forget to avoid walking directly backwards from players with the S key. Instead, use A or D. By far the most important movement tech in Dark and Darker is B-hopping. In Dark and Darker, your momentum is maintained while you are jumping, so you can B-hop, which is the act of repetitive jumping to keep momentum when performing an action such as healing, reloading, or casting that would normally slow you down. This is done most easily by binding your jump command to scroll wheel. Once your bindings are correct, you execute this by B-hopping to maintain your momentum, then performing the desired action during the jump animation. Since there are damage modifiers in the game for sweet spots at the end of weapons and the head of players, it's important to use good movement to make your head harder to hit and to make the enemy miss the sweet spot of their weapon. You can be very creative here, as there are lots of ways to lean and strafe in Dark and Darker to make yourself harder to hit. The last part of winning a PvP fight is game knowledge. This you will have to gain over time. Here are some basic tips to get you started. Try to avoid fighting from low ground, as this makes it easier for your opponent to land headshots. Make sure you know your weapon's moveset. This way you could use the environment to win a fight. For example, As a rogue, it is very good to fight in doorways, since all of your attacks are stabs that will not be blocked by the door frame. You can easily take advantage of some players who are using something like a Zweihander with wide sweeping attacks that simply cannot hit you back while you're in the doorway. Lastly, one of the best ways to never lose fights is get better at deciding which fights to take and which to avoid. To help with this, here is a basic matchup sheet for the classes and their counters. This is my opinion with limited playtime on some of these classes, so feel free to correct me in the comments below if you feel I'm wrong. Yellow means neutral or skill based, green is a good matchup for the class, and red is a bad matchup for the class. Druid is an outlier because I believe it has no bad matchups and counters everything if the player is good enough. I also excluded some information on Bard because I've never played the class. Now that you've killed mobs, looted chests, and killed players in your way, it's time to take the blue portal, exit, and cash in. It can be hard to know what your items are worth, but you will learn as you go. Once you hit level 20 on a character, you'll be able to trade and buy or sell items from other players. You can also use these features to check the value of items in gold if you're unsure. Otherwise, various items can be sold directly to the merchants for gold. As you do more quests, the merchants will be able to sell you more items and offer services such as crafting potions or special armor type. Make sure you don't vendor quest items if the quest has not been completed. This will stop you from completing the quest and you have to go back and retrieve the items again. As you continue to play, you will acquire better loot and more gold. You want to buy better gear for high roller and arena matches. Learning what gear to look for in the marketplace is something you will learn along the way. In general, the base stats that are already the highest on your chosen class are the stats you will want to continue building on your chosen class. It is easier to learn how stats work if you play one class at a time and go from there. Additionally, hovering over each stat will tell you how it affects your character, so don't feel the need to memorize everything off rip. I recommend watching various content creators for builds if you don't like creating your own. I will also link a helpful resource below to make the process of learning about gear and stats easier. Keep in mind you can be very creative with builds in this game, and I encourage you to experiment with playing the classes in a way you enjoy. If you master everything in this brief guide, you will rapidly improve in your quest to conquer the dungeons, and hopefully avoid a lot of the hours I put in learning all of these strategies. I hope this video provided some value to your Dark and Darker journey. If it did, feel free to let me know down in the comments below. Otherwise, keep exploring the dungeons and embrace the dark.